You know, I've been doing this work for 45 years. And over that time, I invented my own technique. I began to find out new things that came in that nobody else had ever discovered. So big and so important, so we called it QHHT, because it's way beyond past life regression. And this is the healing technique that we've now been teaching it, well, since 2002, that's 12 years. Well, as part of this technique, the very first thing that you do is take the client into a past life. Past life is just the very, very beginning. Then we go to this great power that I work with. To please take advantage of the training that is now available online. You can find it through my website, DoloresCannon.com.
Really amazing when you're what?
There it is, yeah. Okay, I guess everybody's about ready to go again. Showtime again. And they'll start coming in. You got 2 hours, so they'll all be in here after you get going. Okay. So if you want to mention about him, however you want to do it then. Okay. All right, our next speaker is Tricia Mccannon. And we go back 20 years or more. I know you probably get tired of hearing me say that. She is not an author. As I told you yesterday morning that one of our authors died while his book was at the printer. And we called her in to take his place because it's along the same subject matter. And I've known her forever, but that's why we do have some that are not our authors that we do call in. So we've been around so long, we know everybody in the business. We paid our dues. We were joking about that. Was that first night he saw her again? We started out back in the days when nobody paid your airfare, nobody paid your hotel room, nobody gave you a fee. We had to get there the best way we could, do our talks, and promote your books and things, and you did readings. And nobody paid us. We just did it because this was what you had to do. And it was years later I began thinking, they were using us. The things have changed now. But then a lot of speakers now, they got to know how much they're going to be paid. They got to have everything handled. And we just went and did it because it was our passion and our work. And it has all paid off in the long run. 20 years of doing it. In fact, we have outlived those expos. They're no longer in existence.
I know.
Okay. But Tricia and I are old friends anyway. That's where I met a lot of these people, was on the lecture circuit in those early days. So it's good. It all pays off.
Daniel, you and me. That's right.
He was always joking about it. We were doing panels, and they say, okay, we got both of our cannons here now. We can start.
Perfect.
Okay. All right, but Tricia is going to talk a little bit about, you want to talk about Robert Winterhalter a little first, or what?
Yeah, I
Mention him.
I want to really thank him, you
Yeah.
know. But if you'd like to say something about the book, please do, about his book.
I don't know, some of you were here, we started out, some of you were not, maybe. But Robert Winterhalter was an author we took on who wrote a wonderful book about Jesus. And he died while the book was at the printer. And we kept saying, oh, he never even got to see the finished product. But my daughter said he knows.
He knows, he saw it. But his book is The Healing Christ. And it's a book about where he took all of the miracles that Jesus performed in the Bible, and he explained them, how Jesus was able to do them metaphysically, and how everyone can do the same thing. So it's a very practical book. And then he died while it was being printed. All we had time was to put in like an obituary in the last part, and on the copyright page we always put the birth and the death. But he worked a lot with the Unity churches, so we figured they're probably going to push it because they've already been talking to us about it, that he was into that. So anyways, it's happening, but it's just kind of strange. Yesterday, you know Blair, did you remember what he said? Remember Blair Styra? He went past the table. He felt a surge of tremendous energy coming from where we have the book sitting. And all of a sudden, he said, I realized he's here. Robert Winterholler is here. And that would make sense. He would want to come and see the book. This is where he was supposed to talk. And Blair said, his energy's here. He's watching, and he's participating. But Tricia had just come out with her book about Jesus. And you said 2 years in the making, 3 years in the making. And he ended up taking about 200 pages out. Some authors say, why isn't my book out now? Well, sorry, it doesn't happen that way in a lot of cases. It takes a while to hone it and perfect it. So it did come out now after they have taken those pages out.
In March, and then Coast to Coast. I just had that George Norrie, and it was an avalanche after that. Mm-hmm. So very blessed.
Every time you do Coast to Coast, there is.
It's great.
But I knew you back when you were doing the angel readings.
Well, I still do soul readings.
You're still doing the angel readings.
And I still have my book, Dialogues with the Angels, although we're down to our last 60 copies, so there's only 5 left in the booth. That's it. And then you have to order it off my website. So.
And you're going to stay over for 2 days.
Yes, Monday until about 3 o'clock on Tuesday, and then we'll be driving back to Atlanta, back home.
So if you already got your appointments filled?
I have a few left.
If anybody wants angel readings from Tricia, she's going to be here for Monday and Tuesday after the conference is over. Okay, well, I'm going to let Tricia talk about her book and everything now, and it's good to see you again and good to have you back.
Thank you so much.
Okay.
Don't we love her? Isn't she just great? It's true.
I always say old friends are the best. You can't hide anything from them. They know where all the skeletons are hidden. Okay.
Thank you all so much for being here. Isn't this just a wonderful group of people? Don't we really want to honor and thank Dolores again? The 5th Annual Paranormal Conference in Arkansas. This is my very first time in Arkansas, and I must say, I've been impressed by everybody that I've met. It's not only a very beautiful state, but all the people that I've met here have been very high consciousness, very beautiful heart-centered beings, and some very old souls. And many of you, I look around and I see angels over, and I see masters working with. So, you know, when she says I do angel readings, I think she's really talking about the fact that since I was a little girl, I have had the gift of sight. And when I was young, I lived across from a great forest, and I could see angels and fairies and divas in the forest. And I grew up in Atlanta in a very conservative Christian family, the classic Judeo-Christian family. In fact, my older sister is married to a preacher, and they're definitely convinced that all of us are going to hell. So having said that, I found myself growing up visiting a lot of the multidimensional levels of reality in my dream state. And I did a lot of praying growing up that someone wiser than myself would show up, because I would look at information about people and be flooded with information. And then other times when I would look, I couldn't see anything. And it was like, well, how does this gift work? Where's the gas and where's the brake? How many of you know what I'm talking about? So when I was 19 years old, a group of very powerful interdimensional masters called the Viragi appeared to me. Now, Virag means truth or detachment in Sanskrit. And these are masters who are very long-lived. There are about 5 or 6 of them still on the planet. One's 5,000 years old, one's 3,000 years old, one's 350 years old. And they said, we've watched you for many years. We've put you through a series of tests. You passed. You've chosen compassion over the other choices you could have made. And so we will train you. So they begin to teach a very powerful, not only did they have the roadmap of the multidimensional levels of reality, which was huge for me, because I had been traveling through these planes all the time I was growing up, but a lot of times I had no idea where I was. I mean, one night I'd be in one of the temples of golden wisdom, and another night I'd be in the bowels of the lower astral plane. How many of you know what I'm talking about? So having this map was huge, and they also taught that the divine can be known through 3 very powerful things: love, sound, and light. These are the 3 core principles of creation. The whole universe is actually made of the adamantine particles of love. And the sound, in the beginning was a word, really was the creation of everything in the universe. Physicists are now discovering that behind everything we see and everything we don't see is, in fact, vibration. And then from those phonons, that's what they call them. I love how the science is catching up with the metaphysicians and mystics. They become photons. From sound comes light. So they taught a very specific set of spiritual disciplines called soul travel. There were techniques for learning to shift your consciousness while you were still living in the physical body, and to be able, while we're still living here, to journey into the inner worlds and find out for yourself what's true. Well, this was my kind of path. You know, I've never been the believe now, take our word for it, find out after you die kind of girl. My dad's a lawyer. Even though I'm a mystic and a clairvoyant, I really like evidence. I'm seriously evidence-based. Thus, of course, the Jesus is heavily evidence-based, and what I'm going to be presenting to you today is heavily evidence-based. So on the outside, in my Clark Kent world, I became a commercial advertising photographer. I've had a studio for some 30 years. In fact, I'm closing my studio when I come back, the weekend after I come back from this trip, for the first time in 30 years, which is a very big deal. And I've shot for Ralph Lauren and Calvin Klein and Women's Wear Daily and Georgia Pacific and Coca-Cola. That's the Clark Kent life. How many of you have a Clark Kent life? And how many of you have a Supergirl or Superguy life? Well, for me, I also have this. So during my 20s, I was very focused on learning, working with these masters, my 20s and my 30s. And as Dolores will tell you, when I was about 28 years old, I started a nonprofit organization in Atlanta called the UFO Forum. Because since I was a little girl, I've seen ships, I've been on board ships with very benevolent, kind beings, but I was not really willing to come out of the closet and tell people this. So I had an organization where I brought in one speaker each month. I even brought Dolores in one time to talk about multidimensional realities, and to talk about the nature of reality and the possibility that we're not alone in the universe. How many of you think we're not alone in the universe? Well, I'm among my own soul family here. So I found a few years into this that my guide said, it's time for you to really begin speaking, and I was completely reluctant to speak. I was like, I'm not speaking in Atlanta. I have a professional reputation to uphold. And so they said, well, fine, go to Los Angeles. And to this day, I can hardly sort of believe that happened, but I did what they told me. I rented an auditorium. I flew out to LA. No one knew me. I didn't know anyone. All these key people came from Los Angeles area, from radio, from television. And because I'm evidence-based, and I had the map to reality, I taught Friday, Saturday, and Sunday about how the universe is stacked, and where the angels fit in, where the demons fit in, where the ghosts fit in, where the ETs fit in, where the humans fit in, where the masters fit in. Because in truth, all of it's true. Where do the fairies fit in? Where do the muses fit in? How does it all fit together? And for me, this has really been my great passion. As a clairvoyant, when I first began reading, I was only going 3,000, 4,000, 5,000 years into people's soul histories. And then about 4 years into reading, I made a leap where I was going 50,000, 100,000 years in the past. And I found myself in completely different civilizations. I found myself in Atlantis, for example, that was up for a long period of time and went through many eras, including eras that looked very much like ancient Greece, eventually to eras that look much more like our technology and our cities of today. And I saw that Atlantis was a star capital, that there were a lot of ships going in and out at various periods of time. So sometimes I would find that my client actually had come here from another place. And then I thought, well, wait a minute, where did they come from? So I found myself beginning to pull the thread to find out where that soul had sourced from. And I found myself in the Pleiades, or in Sirius, or in Arcturus, or in Andromeda, or in Orion. Well, you know, it's a very big puzzle that we're all working on, isn't it? And if you get enough pieces of the puzzle, I've read for over 6,000 people all around the world, you know, you begin to have some idea of what the picture looks like. So, you know, as I continued to pull, I found myself tracking the souls up into the fourth dimension, the fifth dimension, and then up into the higher worlds. And eventually I came to what I would call the Genesis Matrix. And one of the things I discovered to my complete and utter astonishment is that each and every one of us come from the angelic kingdoms. How many of you find that a surprise? We all originate from the angelic worlds. Well, so then the question became, well, wait a minute. If we started off as angels, what the heck happened? You know, if we started off so perfect and so much in accord with divine harmony, how did we fall into our seeming imperfection? So then my journey for many years became to really track souls down from the higher realms and discover what it was that had caused the illusion of separation. So my passion became really figuring out where souls were, let us say, not aligned with their higher selves and helping them to create that alignment. So I became trained in many different healing modalities, and even today I clear curses, vows, erroneous belief systems formed in times of trauma, bindings, cords, and old soul contracts. And these are the 5 things that I really discovered that beneath the level of the conscious mind many times operate in our lives in ways that don't support us. So I am a very powerful clairvoyant. My focus, and every clairvoyant is different. I think that we're all, like if you had 20 painters, you know how you'd have 20 different styles? Every clairvoyant has their antenna pointed to a different place. For some, like John Edwards or maybe Daniel, it's the 4th dimension. He's talking to the dead. That's one of his great gifts. You know, we all enjoyed him last night, and he was really able to help, like John Edwards, a lot of people resolve issues that they haven't been able to resolve once the loved one has crossed over. My focus is really who are we at the highest level of our being, and what has our journey been through time? What are the things we've mastered? What are we still working to master? Why did we come into this lifetime? And what is it that blocks us from fulfilling our greatest potential? So, you know, how the work with, if we can kind of turn this on, this would be great, Greg, the slideshow. So I'd like to just talk a little bit about this. I'm going to tell you just a little bit about myself before we jump into this very power-packed presentation. Our talk today is really about Jesus, the Great White Brotherhood, and the return of the Lords of Light. And we might ask ourselves, how did I get over to this from the story that I told you? Well, certainly my very first book, Dialogues with the Angels, has been sold around the world, and it really begins with my conversations with the divas and the angels and then the masters that come in when I'm 19 and their profound teachings, and eventually to the beings that I've worked with today. The book on Jesus I never intended to write, as I say in the preface. I was actually writing a book called Decoding the Mysteries of the Ages. And the subtitle was The Secret Teachings of Jesus, Isis, Horus, and the Masters of the Far East, because I've been a student of these profound masters within the Great White Brotherhood, and I'm trained in about 4 or 5 shamanic traditions, including the Native American twisted hair, which are a very ancient, rare group of, let us say, time walkers who are able to travel the Akashic records. There are only 300 to 500 of these people, and they claim to have the records of the planet going back some 230,000 years. I'm also trained in the goddess traditions, and for many years I've taught work for empowerment to women, And for many years, I only taught female shamanic circles. In the last 10 years, I've begun to teach men as well. I have a mystery school in Atlanta called the Phoenix Fire Lodge, the Order of the Eagle and the Dove. And, you know, it takes a year to even go through the first level of the program, but there are 9 weekends. And I do teach both men and women now. And I'm working on doing an online series of classes. But meantime, I actually have produced 25 DVDs about these great mysteries. And you're going to be learning about some of those mysteries today because Jesus, of course, was a student of these mysteries. So in the middle of writing this book about decoding the mysteries of the ages, what happened for me was that I wrote 3 little chapters on Jesus, and then I went on. I had other great avatars to teach about. And you know, as I continued to write, I think, well, I bet people don't know this about Jesus. Because since I have a fundamentalist Christian side of my family, as a metaphysician, I've always carried Jesus kind of in the periphery of my consciousness. I felt like that, you know, if I was going to believe something, I had to have documentation about it. And so when these... I decided I was just going to, I wound up adding 200 pages to the book, and then I thought, Mamma mia, you know, they're having babies. This book is just, you know, we're having 6 books here. So I thought, well, I'm just going to pull this part out about Jesus. It'll make the whole thing, you know, shorter. The publishers will be much happier. And so I had this experience where I was laying on the floor of my office, and it was that week between Christmas and New Year's Eve. You know that week. It's like the cave time. It's a great time for going inside yourself. And I had laid down on the floor, and I had my hand over my eyes like this. And I suddenly became aware of this brilliant light that was flooding my body. And I moved my hand, and Jesus was standing right above me, looking down at me. Now, this was really the last thing that I ever expected. And without any preamble, he said, I want you to write a book about my lost years and secret teachings. There's been enough war and bloodshed in my name. And when I could get over the shock of the fact that he was standing there, I said, well, could I finish this other book first? And he smiled and moved his hand like, don't worry, you know, it'll just take a moment. I'll open every door. And I thought, well, okay, you know, and you know how the little monkey mind is. How hard can it be? Okay, I'll just take those 200. It'll take 3 months. That's what'll happen. Only 3 months. And, you know, then I thought, wait a minute, write a book about Jesus. Oh, my God, they'll burn me at the stake, you know. They'll have me for lunch, you know, the fundamentalist Christian movement that in the name of the Prince of Peace continues to judge, even though Jesus said, judge not, lest ye be judged. You know, so I had a great deal of resistance to it, but as I worked through my thoughts, Jesus literally stood over me, tracking every single thought with me telepathically. And I finally came to the point of realizing, you know, wait a minute, you know, he incarnated in the middle of 2 of the densest groups on the planet at that time, the Romans and the Jews. If he can do that and take on that mission, I mean, I could at least write a book, right? So I said, okay. So for the next 6 months, I organized my material around the great mysteries. And I began with the Egyptian mysteries because I'm trained in the Egyptian mysteries, and they are fundamental to everything. They're really the source. They're the motherland source within our known history. And then I moved to the Jewish mysteries, the esoteric Jewish mysteries of King Solomon and Enoch, and then I finally moved to the Christian mysteries. And I found myself in the process really exploring the Tree of Life, which we're going to look at today, talking about the angelic kingdoms and the 9 orders of the angels, the different kinds of spirit guides, and really also looking at the hidden history of the human race that most people know nothing about, that I've spent years and years speaking about on the circuit. The extraterrestrial seeding of this planet. So I have DVDs, I have like 25 DVDs that I've produced over the last 9 months on all of these things. And so when this is over, if you want to come check them out, great. But it's really a body of information about the mysteries. So this is how this book, if we can kind of go back to this, began to be produced. I'd like to tell you just for a moment about the beings that I work with, who are my great teachers. I would not be here today without them. I work with a group of beings called the Council of Nine. The Council of Nine are the 9 primordial waveform energies that create, maintain, and sustain everything in the universe. Mystics throughout the ages have known of them as the 9 silent ones. They are referred to in the most hidden ancient of texts. Now, I had no idea when they arrived who the heck they were, but at the core of them are the eagle and the dove. The eagle is the divine father energy, and of course, we all know the dove from Christianity as the divine mother energy. This great thunderbird energy I call Rigel. That's how I know him. But he is the father energy whose wings turn the universe, turn the galaxies, turn the electrons around the atoms. The spiral of the golden mean spiral, or the Fibonacci spiral, the way the hair grows on the top of our head, the way that flowers unfurl. This is his energy that moves the universe. He has been known to many different mystics throughout the ages, and certainly Horus was one of his incarnations, as was Jesus. You will find I think I talk about the 4 great Kumaras. I definitely, throughout the book I do. We'll see tonight. I think today we're actually getting into the Kumaras. The Kumaras are the 4 expressions of the divine masculine. Jesus talks about this in the Sophia of Jesus the Christ, where he said, the divine mother, Sophia, the goddess of wisdom, comes into the world again and again. This is why she was known as Isis, she of 10,000 names and 10,000 faces. But the Divine Father does not come into the world directly. He only comes to these incarnations of his divine sons. And there are 4 of them. They're spoken of actually in the ancient Vedas as the 4 great Kumaras. And Jesus was, of course, one of these. He was Sananda Kumara. The head of the Great White Brotherhood is Sanat Kumara. So you can see immediately how these 2 are linked together. And today we're going to be taking a journey where we discover who these great lords of light actually are. I also work with the Divine Mother, the energy of the dove. And she, of course, is the path of the heart, the path that Jesus himself taught. It is her heartbeat that dwells within each and every one of us. She has been known by many different names throughout the ages, but I know her as Ariel, the creatress from which all the Divine Mothers spring. And her symbols are many, but above all, it is, of course, the dove, or the Holy Spirit. She was known in Christianity as Mary, Queen of Heaven. But before that, the symbols of Mary, La Mer, the great ocean, La Mer, Marie, think about it, the great ocean of love and mercy from which we all arise at the beginning of time. She was known as Isis, Queen of Heaven. These are just 2 of her many incarnations. Now we can turn, if you'd like to, we can turn the lights down a little bit so that you have a little more depth in these slides. Is that okay? I think it's a good time to do it. I love these images, and I know I go a little bit into shadow, and mostly I'm going to be up here, but there are a couple I may have to jump down here in order to be able to see the way the screen's set on the periphery. But isn't that a little better? Do you want to make it a little darker, Joy? You want to come down just a little bit more? You want to go to 4? See how 4 goes? Are we on 4 already? Okay. Can you guys see well? Okay. I like the pictures. So, of course, she was known as the Queen of Heaven, and she's depicted through certain Hermetic symbols. Now, Hermetics is one of the ways that the ancients taught. This is one of the ways that the great mystics who traveled these inner planes communicated in these glyphs the esoteric knowledge of the inner planes. And I'm a Hermeticist. And any of you who begin to study the mysteries, you too will find yourself fascinated by Hermetics. And we're going to be talking about where that word comes from. But Hermetics is the study of the esoteric symbols. In our civilizations, we know about exoteric symbols like stop the car, moose crossing here, don't smoke a cigarette. But Hermetics is esoteric symbolism. And when you begin to look at these beautiful pictures that many of the great mystics of the past have painted, you begin to discover and penetrate these Hermetic symbols. So today we're going to be taking a look at that. I also obviously work with the 4 great Kumaras. And Jesus is the one that perhaps most of us most know and love. This image, how many of you have seen this image? It actually appeared on a piece of film in someone's camera. That's how this picture originated, and it fits perfectly over the Shroud of Turin. I find that to be most interesting, don't you? Now, we're going to be talking about the return of these great lords of light because we're actually due for one of them to come back to our planet. And throughout history, and many of you may not know your Egyptian history, and that's okay if you don't, I'm going to give you a little glimpse into that. We have Osiris, Jesus, Horus, and Thoth. This is the legacy of the divine sons of God. They were known as the great transcendent ones, the four deathless ones that exist beyond the worlds of space and time, that could insert themselves into the worlds of matter whenever they chose. They were also known as the great shepherds, or the good shepherds. And we all know this from Jesus, but most of you probably don't know that one of Osiris's titles was Osar, which means the good shepherd. In fact, you will see as we go through our presentation that this is one of the great Hermetic symbols because they led their people to safety. Now, Webster's defines a shepherd as a person who herds and takes care of the sheep, a leader of a group, especially a clergyman, to tend, herd, guard, or lead like a shepherd. And there are certain Hermetic symbols that are associated with them, foremost among them, the great Lion of God. And many of us have seen this symbolism connected with Jesus, of course, but as we go back in time, we discover that the symbolism of the great lion who is connected with the sun. If you think about it, within the 12 signs of the zodiac, the only sign that's overseen by the sun is Leo, right? So Leo is the sign of the king, the kingly prince. So the sun became very important because within the ancient world, they believed that this divine father energy expressed itself in three ways. First is the great central sun behind everything, the one that was the regulator of all things, the light of the universe. Second is the visible sun in our heavens, because of course without our sun, guess what? No life. And third is what they call the solar sun, S-O-U-L-A-R. This was the incarnation of the divine Father energy that came as the Son or sons of God. He is directly linked to the sun and to the great central sun, and he's also directly linked to all of these great Hermetic symbols. Let's take a look. The sun, the lion, the lamb, the shepherd's staff, the caduceus, the dove, the Holy Spirit, the cross, the chiro, the tree of life, the serpent of wisdom, and the phoenix. That mystical bird that comes from the higher world singing its song of glory, who is so beautiful that it basically erupts in flames, but not before laying its seeds for its next incarnation. Now, let's take a look at what the divatory meanings of the lion and the lamb are. The lion, of course, represented honor, radiance, kingship, and vitality, and the moment of enlightenment. We say we're working for enlightenment. Well, what better symbol to use than the sun? The 97 to 99% of the mass of our entire solar system is the sun, the light of the world. Purity, innocence, gentleness, and sacrifice, of course, the unblemished one. He was also linked to the sign of Leo. And if you look right into the heart chakra, and this beautiful drawing was done by my girlfriend Sylvia Lorenz, who's an amazing mystical painter, and she's got some gorgeous soul portraits of people. She also is a clairvoyant and sees their spirit guides around them and paints them. So any of you who've ever desired to have this done, she's fabulous, amazing, and very, very affordable. But she did many of the illustrations within this book. And you see Regulus in the heart. This is very important because within the ancient mysteries of Egypt, the initiates went between the paws of the Sphinx, literally into the heart chakra of the lion. This was the entrance to the underground city beneath the Sphinx and beneath the Great Pyramid. You had to enter the heart of the lion. Regulus is a sun about 5 times larger than our own sun, and there's a lot to be said about this, but you're going to see this symbolism again and again in connection with them. Here's our beloved Jesus with the lion and the lamb around him. Let's look at other places we've seen it. Let's see if I've got my little pointer. I get to work it for the first time. This is, of course, most of us know this winged lion with a book in connection with the Apostle Mark. Mark, one of the 4 apostles, the Gospels, and it was connected with the city of Venice. But way before that was true, it was connected with the Egyptian mysteries. In fact, this very image of the lion with the book of knowledge was connected with the great god of wisdom, Thoth, who was the architect of many of the great mystery schools. And it was said that when you entered the heart of the Sphinx and went into this process of initiation, at the end, what you were seeking was the secret knowledge of the book of Thoth, the book of secrets that gave you the roadmap into the inner worlds to be able to soul travel when we leave this body into the higher worlds in order to reach the center of the universe, the great creator itself. We see here other symbols. These are crests. Here's the crown of heaven. Here's the infinity symbol. Looks like a ribbon. Okay, here we are again. This is from Venice. I've traveled there many times. But even more telling, way before Christianity, way before Judaism, we have, this is from Egypt. This is Ra, the god of light. We see the sun on the top of his head. He's got a hawk head. And, you know, again, they use these Hermetic symbols to mean something. They were not the eagle. The eagle is the one that is the father. They were the sun, the one who came down, the hawk or the falcon. He who has far-seeing vision and turns in the horizon. But before him stands a priest of Osiris. Osiris, I believe, after all the research I've done, was probably an earlier incarnation of Sananda Kumara, who was Jesus, because the MO is very, very similar, as we will see. Notice that this priest of Osiris is wearing a leopard skin. So the leopard, and the lion, all connected. And when we go over to, you know, the South America, it's the puma. Again, very similar Hermetic symbols. Now, very far back in time, we find Tammuz. Tammuz, you notice, is standing on a giant lion. Isn't this interesting? You see this radiant sun behind him. This is from ancient Sumeria. And here we see the Persian Mithra. Many of you who studied Christian history may know that Mithra and Mithraism was the greatest competitor to Christianity until about 400 AD. When Constantine decided to legitimize Christianity, he was actually the head of the Mithran order. He was the sole Invictus of his age. Now let's look at the Hermetic symbolism here. He has a lion's head. He has wings. He's holding the staff of knowledge. And he's holding a very interesting instrument here. It looks like a square, okay? Like the Masons, you know, the compass and the square, meaning I am on the square. I am on the level. I stand for truth. What I say is truth. This is what the symbolism of this means. And he's standing on a world, and there's a big X here. And I want you to kind of remember this X. This is called the Chi-Rho. And we're going to finally, if we have time, we'll get to the Chi-Rho towards the end of this presentation because it's connected to the end of the cycles of time. And of course, we're coming to the end of a great cycle in time now. Of course, the Jewish version of this is the great Lion of Judah from the line of King David and King Solomon. They just, by the way, they just kind of conscripted this right out of Egypt. And of course, Jesus inherited this title as the Great Lion of God, wearing, by the way, you know, a crown with the keys to the kingdom of heaven. Now, he was the Son, S-O-N, and the Son, S-U-N, of God, very much linked together. He's linked to the annual cycles, which means the movement of time in the vegetation cycles. Every winter solstice, and this is actually astronomically true, when we have the winter solstice on December 21st, it's the shortest day of the year. In other words, the sun is at its lowest, most southern point. It takes 3 days, so it's the 21st, the 22nd, 23rd, 24th, and on the 25th, it begins to visibly move back from having descended to this low southern point. So every winter, the sun dies, okay? It's at its lowest ebb. And then on the day of Jesus' birthday, which was also Mithra's birthday, Horus's birthday, Osiris's birthday, December 25th, it begins its climb back eventually to ascendancy, and that ascendancy takes place Monday night. Yeah, in 2 days, June the 21st, we have the summer solstice. the longest day of the year, when the sun is at its, its greatest peak, its greatest exaltation. So, therefore, every Easter, by the way, he dies and is reborn, okay, and this is way before Christianity. At the height of the summer solstice, his light is celebrated. As the Son of God, he sits at the center of everything. He is, in fact, the light of the world. He's connected also with the great cycles of time, not only in the annual year, but also in the great precession of the equinox, the 26,000-year precession, or 25,920 if you want to be exact, movement of time of the great ages. And our consciousness is highly affected by the movement of these great ages. Every one of the 12 signs of the zodiac basically rules us for 2,160 years. And within that age, there are certain energies present. For example, the energies present in the age of Pisces, which we're coming out of, Jesus came to set those energies. The Kumaras come between the turn of the ages. And he came in to say some very cool things. The kingdom of heaven's inside of us. You don't need a priest or a rabbi. Most people don't know that. He was a big honorer of women. I talk about that in the secret teachings. He adored women. He thought that they were awesome. And there's all this hidden stuff that was taken out of the Bible that Jesus talked about the importance of honoring the divine feminine and the women. And of course, the patriarchy didn't like that one little bit, did they? So, imagine what a different world it would be. So I talk about that in my DVD on the secret teachings. So as we move around, we fall into a slumber or we awaken. Now, most of us know that we're awakening. That's where we are right now. But to a large degree, we've been in high slumber, especially for the last, 1,000 years. We started really waking up again at the time of the Renaissance. And this all has to do with these cycles of time, the silver, the golden, the bronze, and the iron age. And just like we have 60 seconds in a minute, and 60 minutes in an hour, and 60 minutes in a, or how many minutes in an hour, and 24 hours in a day, there are cycles of golden, silver, bronze, and iron within other cycles. So we came into the dark of the dark at the fall of King Arthur. That was what that was about. It was all about the preservation of the balance of the divine feminine. When that happened, the Lady of the Lake pulled back, Isis pulled back, Diana, her temple fell in 400 BC, all of that pulled back. The divine feminine, and what we had, every age is meant to be male dominant, female subdominant, or female dominant, male subdominant, except for 4 ages. And these are the classic ages of the lion, the man, the bull, and the eagle, which is the high end of Scorpio. During those ages, and we're coming into one of them, they're meant to become partners. They're meant to come into a partnership model, which is what we're beginning to come into today. But what happened after Jesus, because the patriarchy, he came at it was the hardest time he could possibly come. It was the age of Aries, the warrior. Now, in that high form, Aries is the great pioneer, but in its low form, it's the victimizer. Pisces, in its high form, is the great mystic, the lover of God that is able to travel in the infinite, but in its low form, it's the victim. So Mr. Victimizer meets Miss Victim, and what have we had for 2,000 years? We've had male dominant and male subdominant. We only began to move out of that some 500 years ago. I talk about this in the whole age of Aquarius and all the ascension codes and the tree of life and all of that kind of stuff in my DVDs. So where we are right now is we're at the change of the ages, and there's a great deal to be said about that. But as the light bringer who comes between the change of the ages, he is the great awakener. And he is the one who comes back again and again to say, I know you guys didn't get it the last time, but I'm here to try to give it to you again, see how you do with it. Hopefully some of you will awaken, get it, and get out. And of course, where we are now is we're in a place of transformation for the entire planet, where we're having an opportunity to graduate from Earth School after a 26,000-year cycle. Very exciting time. Now, as the Son of God, he's also linked to the vegetation cycles of fertility. And there were 8 cardinal points within the ancient year that were honored, and they're 6 weeks apart. You have the equinoxes, you have the solstices, and you have those 4 points in between that have been pretty much obliterated by Christianity. But they were May Day, okay, Beltane, the birds and the bees and the flowers and the trees and the moon up above and a thing called love, okay. That was the one where they actually got to make love, and children that were conceived. It was great. And that was the only one that they got to have sex. I want to make that really clear, okay? The only sex day. But it was a celebration of the joy of nature. And then we have the solstice. Then we have August 1st that was conscripted as Lammas within the Christian year. Then we have the equinox where everything is equal, the day and night. Then we have Hallowmas, or Halloween we call it. All Saints' Day, the night where we begin to enter the darkness, where the veils are thin and we can honor the ancestors, those we love who have passed on. Then we have the winter solstice. Then we come around to Candlemas. Candlemas is, things have been really dark. If you didn't have electricity, everyone's like, when will the winter be over? When? So they show up with candles to say, we love the light. We know the light is returning. Let us honor the return of the light that's coming. And the next holiday is, of course, the spring equinox, where we see finally the light and dark are equal. So these were sacred days within the ancient year. And it's nice for us to honor these natural seasons because it's not about someone's philosophy or religion. It's about how the heavens and the earth are programmed as a giant clock. And at those points, we're able to, the veils between the worlds become very thin, and you're able to work interdimensionally with angels or with masters or with loved ones who have passed on. That's why they had those days. Now, linked to the cycles of fertility, he became known as the Green Man. In other words, the one who dies and whose birth regenerates the world. And you sort of see this with the Celtic has a version of this. The Druids had a version of it. And Osiris was depicted as green most of the time, not because he had green skin, but because they're telling you he's linked to the cycles of fertility all over the world. Sometimes you'll see him as black too, not because he was black or white, or they weren't talking that. They're talking Hermetics here. Egypt was known as the Black Lands because when the Nile rose, the topsoil, the silt came down, and it was that fertility that was the breadbasket of the Mediterranean. Just like today in Europe, England is the breadbasket. That's where all the oats and the wheat is grown. In Jesus' day and age, Egypt was the breadbasket. You remember in the Bible how when there was a famine, it was only Egypt that had any food? Okay, so it was the rich delta soil, the black soil of Chem. Chem was what they called Egypt. Alchemy, chemistry, okay? Alchem, okay? It's the alchemy of that land. So many times he's depicted as green or black, and here we see him again with some very important symbols. We see the crook and the flail. The crook is the shepherd's staff, isn't it? Telling us right here, I'm the good shepherd. And the flail, I can lead you and I can protect you. And even when you start looking at these Hermetic symbols, he has the three flails, which is, the physical, the emotional, and the mental aspects of ourselves that we must master. And here we see him again. All these titles that we have for Jesus once belonged to Osiris. Lord of everlastingness, King of righteousness, King of kings, Lord of light who awaits in the halls of the dead. Now, it's not like Jesus ran around and stole them, okay? Let's just make this really clear. These beings come again and again. They know who they are. And they step in to the presence of themselves. And they bring these same Hermetic symbols back again and again. Now, there's a lot to be said about these if you know how to read them hermetically. Let's look at just a couple things. One, many times they're linked with sound. Sound, the word. In the beginning was the word. The word is the logos, which we'll talk about. Jesus, Thoth, Horus, these were all beings that were directly linked to the word. The blueprint of creation. Here we have Osiris right between the left eye and the right eye. Well, let's think about it. What's between the left eye and the right eye? The third eye. So they're telling us, the kingdom of heaven is within. Jesus says it. Go inside, and the desire of every pharaoh who considered himself the representative of Horus on earth, Horus, truth, was that when they died, they went into the halls of Amente, the antechamber of the halls of heaven, and they hopefully had lived a pure enough life of service that they could become one with the Christ. They could become one with Osiris. they will have awakened their inner light, their inner sight. He's always connected with this inner light. Just as Jesus tells us that he was the light of the world. Now, let's look at a few other things. These are Hermetic glyphs. This is the boat of a million years, that when you die, the soul travels on this boat through the duat. The duat is the great beyond, okay? Most of us continue to reincarnate on this planet. We stay stuck in the cycles of reincarnation. But some of us, and this is what the inner teachings of Egypt were about, was to clear your chakras, clear your emotional energies and issues, clear your old karma, balance your physical, your emotional, your astral, your spiritual, your etheric, your causal bodies, all your 7 energy bodies. Actually, they knew of 9, but all the rest of the mystery schools taught 7. But the visible, the outer teachings is the physical, the emotional, and the mental. Just want to make that clear. Even the subtle, knowing about those 7 subtle energy bodies and the 7 chakras was an inner teaching. And then to have the codes and keys to move through the gateways. The gateways are the ring past knots. They are the orbital planes of the planets. And to have the codes and keys to move through these gateways and leave our solar system. Okay? So this is what the Egyptian Book of the Dead was actually about. It was a roadmap into the higher heavens. Now, here we see a bunch of different cool things. First, we see the Ra, in other words, light, in other words, your soul, which is light, right? If you got rid of your body, what would you be? You'd be light. Enthroned on a little dais here. So the soul is traveling in the boat of a million years. And who's he got as his companion? He's got Thoth, the god of wisdom. Thoth is where we get the word thought from today. He's also got Isis, which is love, and Ma'at, which is truth. So these are the companions we have on our journey. We have our hearts, we have our minds, and we have truth, right? Now, who's poling the front of this boat? Very interesting. This would be Set. Set is where we get Satan from today. His name was Setu. Okay, so we turned him into Satan. He was called, the great crocodile or the great dragon, okay? And he really represented all the negative qualities. Our anger, our lust, our greed, our jealousy. I mean, he killed Osiris. He was Osiris's half-brother who murdered Osiris and stole his kingdom and tried to steal his wife. I mean, he was like everything bad that the ego can produce, that would be Set, okay? So we have to ask ourselves, why the heck is Set poling the boat? This is like saying, each of us, when we go through our lives, who's leading? Is our ego leading? Our soul's back there, but who's actually running the show? Is the soul in charge, or is the ego in charge? Now, what's Set doing? He's fighting the dread serpent Apophis. Apophis is, many times he's depicted with 5 heads, and he's all of our issues we haven't solved, all of our addictions, our jealousies, our angers, our griefs, our avarice, our greed, our vanity, all of our issues. So within this mythology, or cosmology, if you will, the soul got on board the bark of a million years and traveled during the 12 hours of the night. And for the first 6 hours, Set was fighting the dread serpent Apophis. Well, no matter how hard he fought, guess what? He couldn't win. It's kind of like us, huh? And in the 6th hour, he who must be remembered, which would be Mr. Osiris dude, arrives. And why do I say must be remembered? Because Osiris in the cosmology was cut into 14 pieces. And it was the love of Isis, his wife, that reunited those pieces and resurrected him. So when they start talking about he who must be remembered, this is a code for Osiris. So in the 6th hour, the Christ arrives. And then what happens is the ego dies, and you go into a death state. Most of us have come to this in some point of our life. We're going along fine, we're having our lives at the ego level, and then we're devastated. Someone in our life dies. We have a divorce. We lose everything in a flood or a fire. Our lives are wiped away, gone, dead. How many of you know what I'm talking about? Okay? This is the beginning of spiritual wisdom. If this has happened to you, this is the doorway opening. And you are slain in the spirit, as they say. And your ego says, I can't do it anymore. I don't have any more resources. My house of cards has tumbled. And at that point, you go into a 4-stage butterfly stage of the chrysalis. You're in the cocoon. You're in the cave. And you're in a place of utter transformation. And through the next hours of the night, you are literally being transformed by this Christed being. But at that point, just like a butterfly, you don't feel like you're a butterfly. You feel like, your life has been taken away and you're having to begin again. And finally, you emerge as the soul, as the great butterfly. So this is part of the great cosmology behind Egyptian teachings, that this is what lives inside of us. Now, in Egypt, Ra, the Lord of Light, became eventually connected with Horus. So you have Ra Harakti, and Ra Harakti was the Horus of the two horizons. From east to west, his great wings turn. And you can see from the Hermetic symbols, he's connected with the sun. Right here, we can read this. He holds the Ankh, eternal life, and he holds the Shin. The Shin is both the infinite, the circle, and the finite. He has balanced his male and female. The female is infinite. The male is finite. And think about it. Circle and line. In fact, in the ancient world, the soul was always considered feminine. But when we come in and we pick up the bodies are layered, masculine, feminine. So the highest body, the diamond body, the soul body, is male. But the soul itself was always considered to be feminine, much as in biology, and most of you probably don't know this today, we're all created feminine. The male, who is the lover of the divine goddess, she adores him. He is produced by the release of another enzyme, an enzyme that turns him. So all things are feminine when we begin, which is, of course, exactly opposite of how we've been taught within the patriarchy, isn't it? That there was Adam and then Eve's just an appendage. She got made from the rib. Oh, yeah. And here we see other Hermetic symbols. He has the sun. He has the snake. The snake is always connected to the awakening of the Kundalini energy and the activation of the inner sight. He also holds the was. Now, was, W-A-S, like we say was, they called it the was. The was is a symbol meaning the word. Let's look at why. This is a tuning fork. Look down below. You can see it looks just like a tuning fork. And they put it at the medulla oblongata right here, and they resonated the sound up the chakras to help the kundalini to rise up and to activate the spirit to leave through the the pineal gland, and to leave through the crown chakra. So this is like saying Horus, who holds the key to eternal life, has within himself the word or the logos, as Jesus does, predating Jesus, of course. Now, Horus was turned into Apollo by the Greeks, who is the god of healing, the god of shepherds, shepherds, flocks, the god of poetry, prophecy, archery, dance, reason. And you can see some of his many symbols of the swans, dolphins, wolves, and so forth. He was the god of healing and the god of music, once again connecting him with the sound current of creation. Now, this was his great-grandfather, or his grandfather, Thoth. Thoth is where we get the word thought today, and he is one of the 4 great Kumaras as well. Thoth, in Egypt, they really weren't wanting to be worshipped as people. Okay, I want to really try to make this clear. I don't know what you guys know about ETs and UFOs. How many of you followed any of that kind of stuff? Okay, very good. How many of you know about the Anunnaki? The Anunnaki gods were tall, long-lived human beings who came to this planet some 435,000 years ago. We are their children. There were, if you look at the anthropological table, and I talk about this in my Angels and the Anunnaki, every 500 million years we move, from Australopithecus, Java man, Neopithecus, Neanderthal to Cro-Magnon. When we get to Cro-Magnon, we have 100 years where basically Cro-Magnon goes down and Homo sapien sapien comes up, way ahead of schedule. And when we analyze the genome structure of human beings, we discover that there's something inserted in our genome that's not in any other living thing on the planet. So the Anunnaki were involved with this seeding. And there's a lot to be said about that conversation that we don't have time for today. But what I will say is that the women were about 9 to 10, 11 feet tall. The men were about 11 to 15 feet tall. Osiris was very tall. He was 15 feet. They live a long time. They live about 500,000 years. So from our point of view, you know, they're like eternal gods. But in truth, they're just like us. I mean, they love, they have children, they have families, they have civilization, and so forth. But they do look a little different. They shine. They emanate light. So this is why they were known as the shining ones. And this is why if you go back and read the Old Testament, you have Noah and Lamech and all these guys, you know, that were descendants. They were demigods. They were part Anunnaki and part human. And that's why with Lamech, you know, they're looking at him saying, are you, like to the mother, are you sure you didn't sleep with a god, basically? He doesn't look like, you know, a human son because the child was radiant. So there's a lot to this history that's been hidden from us, and I speak at length about this, and maybe next year Dolores will have me back and I'll teach you guys all about the Anunnakis, because it's a very fascinating subject. They are actually coming back. Now, will they actually choose to land on our planet? Probably not. They decided about 2,500 years ago, although there are still some of them here, they're in hiding, and there's a lot to be said about that too, but they decided about 2,500 years ago to begin to, well, actually about 5,000 years ago, to begin to withdraw from the planet for some very specific reasons. Again, we don't have time to talk about that today, but these gods, there's a big difference in Mesopotamia and Egypt. In Mesopotamia, the gods mostly wanted to be worshipped and obeyed. In Egypt, this isn't true. You had a group of highly enlightened, I would say Christed beings that incarnated there. You start with Ptah, who we're going to find in just a minute. Ptah was Pa. That's where we get Ma and the Pa. Okay, Ptah, the father of humanity. And from him, he had 6 sons. Ra was one, Thoth was one, Tammuz was one. And then when you come down from that, Isis was Thoth's daughter, and Horus was Isis's son. Okay? So you see that lineage of Christed beings. And so Horus, Isis, Thoth, highly enlightened Christed beings, and Osiris, all about service to mankind. So they didn't really want to be worshipped as people. They wanted to represent cosmological concepts to uplift humanity. That was their thing. So they chose zoomorphic forms, in other words, animal heads, okay, to represent what they stood for cosmologically. So think about it. If you live 500 million years, and 500,000 years, and you landed on a primitive planet, and you were trying to teach and uplift humanity, you know, you'd get tired after a while of the salami baloney, wouldn't you? And you'd start thinking beyond your ego to the point of saying, well, gee, how can I teach them? Well, you know, your whole life is about healing. So you're going to be the healing goddess, okay? And your whole life is about mathematics and science. So you get to represent mathematics and science to teach humanity. So they came up with these Hermetic symbols that they chose very carefully in order to enlighten humanity. So this is one of those. I'm so sorry. Goodness gracious. It was the ibis head. And again, there's a lot of reasons why they chose it. But another one was the Hamachis baboon for him. Well, if you study the Hamachis baboon, what do you find out? Every morning, the Hamachis baboon goes, oh, to the sun. Whoa, I honor the sun. Oh, the one who honors the great light of creation. So you have to study what the symbols are, but they're all profound symbols. Now, this is Thoth and Hathor, and I could spend 20 minutes talking about this presentation. I mean, just this one image. This is full of Hermetic symbolism. This is the time-space grid down here. Here we have the dark and the light, the negative and the positive we all go through in our life. Our challenge as spiritual initiates is to awaken the heart, to balance our male and our female, our inner and our outer, our light and our dark, as Jesus talks about. This is the symbol for Libra, or balance. This is an ancient symbol for the soul, the Ba. This is what the symbol for the Ba, or the soul, is. So here we see it. And this is the balance scale. And if you don't know the stories from the Egyptian Book of the Dead, you probably wouldn't know that this holds your heart. When we die, you know, we're presented with this great light, as Daniel talked about last night, and we go through a life review. What they care about is your heart. That's what they care about. They don't care about how much money you made. They don't care about, you know, how little sex you had. They don't care about whether you were a business tycoon. What they care about is the purity of your heart, who you loved and who loved you, who you helped and who helped you. So if you had a hard heart, a heavy heart, and it's weighed against the feather of Ma'at, the feather of truth, then guess what? You had to reincarnate, back to the drawing board. You hadn't solved your problems. But if you had a heart as light as a feather, that's where we get that expression, then guess what? Go right into heaven. If you had a light heart. Doesn't that all kind of start making sense? Now, many cultures have honored this divine light being. To the Incas, it was called Inti. To the Aztecs, it was called Tantatui. To the Hindus, it was called Surya, and it was the son of the sun. And again, we see these beautiful artistic depictions of these shining ones coming down from the higher heavens. We see Surya and Apollo many times depicted on chariots crossing the sky. And in fact, in the Vatican, there is an image just like this of Jesus on a chariot being led by these flame horses. Most people don't know that. To the Mayans, this sun represented the Hunab Ku. How many of you know that term? The Hunab Ku, it literally means one meaning and one measure, the heartbeat behind everything. And it was believed that our sun, the sun inside of our planet, the molten core, is connected with our sun and our solar system. And our solar system sun is connected with the sun, the great central sun at the center of our galaxy. And that is connected with the great central sun at the center of all galaxies in all places. So it was connected through an umbilicus cord that they call the Kuak Sum. And we too have 7 suns within our body, these 7 chakras. Again, by clearing these chakras, grounding these chakras to the earth, and then connecting our crown chakras to the sun, we can travel through the sun into the center of the galaxy. Once again, this is the journey of the soul into the highest heavens. He was also known as he who burst through at the beginning of all creation. When the great cosmic egg was opened, it was this great solar lord that came forward. Everyone take a breath, deep breath. I know it's when you get into dim light, you know, you can fall asleep. So we're going to get up in a couple of minutes. You guys want to stand up for a minute? Want to just stand up physically? Okay, don't. We're going to kind of keep going here, but I want to let your blood go. So he was the first begotten principle of light in all of creation. This is where we get this whole Christian mysticism we have not been able to figure out for the life of us. What do they mean, the Son of God? We're all sons and daughters of God, aren't we? Yeah, we are. Well, how come he was any different from anybody? Why was he special? Well, it's because they had knowledge of these 4 great Kumaras that periodically came. And they knew that this being is the power of the light that bursts forth from what the ancients called the great cosmic egg. So he is the father principle who comes into the world as one of these 4 sons. As such, he contains within him the entire blueprint or pattern of creation that was known as the Logos, or the Word. And of course, this was known within the ancient Eastern traditions as the divine Purusha. Say it, the divine Purusha. Now, does that just kind of roll off the tongue in a cool way? The divine Purusha. When I discovered the divine Purusha, I was like in ecstasy bliss for about 3 months, walking around going, of course, it's the divine Purusha. Now Buddha was known as the divine Purusha as well. He was known as the Maha, meaning great, Maha Purusha. And Buddha predicted that a fully enlightened being would come some 500 years after him, who he called the second Buddha. And this is one of 5 of the chapters of the Great White Brotherhood around the world that had prophesied Jesus' coming, including the Persians, the Celts, who actually named him and said his name would be Yeshu, the Egyptians, who had long been waiting for him, and the Buddhists, and of course the Essenes. He was known as the light of the world. And Jesus sort of says that. He says, I am the light of the world. For a little time the light is with you, and then no more. He tells us dead on who he is, if we know how to see it. Now, many times he's depicted coming out of this Vesica Piscis. The Vesica Piscis is this almond-shaped here. And it actually is created through the merger of 2 circles. It's another image for the great cosmic egg. Jesus represented the embodiment of this divine Father and this divine Mother into one flame, the trifold flame of the heart. Again, this is a great mystic secret that I'm sharing with you, that if you begin to work at the higher levels, at the heart, the sacred heart contains within it the divine Father, the divine Mother, and the divine child. Now, most of us don't know that there's a divine daughter principle as well, but there is. Of course, all things are in balance. She is the Shekinah, the breath of God. She's the carrier wave of the light of her brother and the sound of creation that allows the worlds to be formed. It is the I am presence. The divine Purusha is known as the selfless self that permeates the universe. The selfless self that permeates the universe. What a concept. It is the witness, the still witness that is within each one of us as atoms in the body of God. Now, I've known this being for many years within the Council of Nine as Sabaoth. And when he came in, for many years I've channeled all over the world. I've spoken about 10 cities in the U.S. and 3 countries a year for about 20 years. The last 3 years I've been in the Jesus cave. I'm just coming out of the cave, And Dolores is one of my beloved girlfriends that's supporting my coming back out into the world with this profound knowledge at this incredibly critical time. Sabaoth, when he would come in, his energy was so powerful, I couldn't just ground it into the heart like Rigel or Oriel or the crown, these top chakras. I had to take it down into the bottom chakras because he's such fire energy. And it's very interesting to me that, I found myself sometimes channeling him, and the energy would come in like this. And so, the kidneys swing like this. Well, that'd be fine for this kidney, but when the current came around this way, it would freeze this kidney. So it created some medical problems for me until I got these bottom chakras more open so I could ground him down. But it's very interesting to me. He came to me for many years, and I would almost be like, you'd be like so overwhelming. I'd be like, well, it's too much. And he would give me these things about, do you not realize that it is my light that coaxes the smallest seed from the darkness of matter, that lights the worlds of creation, that lights all of you, that lives inside your deepest heart. And, I just love these beings. They're so profound. So, I guess I should have known Jesus was on his way, being an aspect of this divine one, but I really didn't see it coming. Now, I want to kind of just explain a little bit of cosmology to all of you here. As you can tell, I'm someone who's profoundly involved as a mystic and a seer in the highest heavens. But here we have the infinite. Now, the Jews call this the On, the A-I-N, meaning the unknowable mystery. Here is the divine Father and the divine Mother. This is power and truth, and this is love and wisdom. And they, of course, their union forms this Vesica Piscis. This is an emblem from Glastonbury Well, where Joseph of Arimathea, set up the very first Christian community in the world, telling us that this union, this importance of the balance between the male and female, was extremely important to the true teachings of Jesus. In fact, in the Gospel of Thomas, Jesus says, when you make the inner into the outer, and the male into the female, and when you make the two eyes into one, then you shall see the kingdom of heaven. He's telling us right there. When we are able to take our masculine aspect and our feminine aspect and find the balance between them, we open a doorway. Now, another way of putting this would be when we activate our left and right hemispheres of our brain, we ignite the corpus callosum and the pineal gland within, and we awaken the third eye, that inner light, and then we're able to travel in the inner worlds. And of course, this is the work that I've been about for some 30 years with the great Viragi, who were my foundational teachers. Now, from this original Trinity that most people know nothing about, most of us, God the Father, but that's not what Jesus taught. We don't know this. Jesus said the Abba, Amma, the Father, Abba, Amma, Mother. The Abba, Amma, that's what he called it. It was, you can find it, I talk about it in my book, and I quote it again and again from these secret documents. I got access to some of the 560,000 documents hidden in the Vatican. When Jesus said, I will open every door, I had books materializing on my bookcase. I had people bringing me rare documents from the Celtic lands and the Indian lands. He wasn't kidding. He completely, Issa, as he went by, orchestrated all of the wealth of information in this book, which is not channeled. It is completely historically based. So you can give it to all your fundamentalist Christian friends who think that you're a little on the crazy side, It's really because I myself have that aspect of my own family. I think it's very important for us to have a bridge that we can walk across where we don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. We don't say, all this stuff is so crazy, it makes no sense to me, let's just throw it out. In truth, the Essenes, who were members of the Great White Brotherhood, then the Gnostics, and the early Christians knew all of these great mysteries. They really did. And the Catholic Church had them too. They just hid them from everyone. And if you understand Hermetics, you can go to the great cathedrals and see this beautiful wisdom literally encoded within the art and the architecture. But you have to be an initiate to see it. So part of what I do is awaken you as initiates so that you too can follow these same golden threads throughout creation. Now, these are some of the historical incarnations of the sun god or the great shepherd kings. I'm sure you recognize many names there. Well, I'm going to mention Ptah just very quickly. Ptah was the father of humanity in more ways than one. He was one of the three Anunnaki gods that were heavily responsible for Homo sapiens sapien. Thoth was another, his son, who was also a geneticist. And Ninharsag, who became known as Hathor, it was the third. She was the chief medical officer. So it was these three who actually took Cro-Magnon man and, jump-started Homo sapiens sapien. And there was a long tale involved with that. Again, I talk about this in the Angels and Anunnaki DVD. Enki was the father of humanity, a great architect, geneticist, philosopher, and world builder, and linked always with the tree of life as Jesus was and some of these other great solar lords. Thoth was the son most like him. He was known as the great god of wisdom, and the Greeks turned him into Hermes, from which we get the word Hermetic. Also, Mercury was the planet associated with him. So he was the god of communication. And you can see many of his Hermetic symbols here as the great initiate. He has conquered his reptilian nature. We have a trifold brain. We have a reptilian brain, a limbic brain, and a cognitive brain. That's a reptilian it does the 4 fours, fighting, feeding, fornicating, and fleeing, We need it while we're down here. But, if it runs us, we're run by our lower appetites, right? The limbic brain is our emotional brain. We also have to find a way to balance that with our mental brain. So we see here that he has conquered his reptilian nature, and he is holding the emerald tablets. He was the author of not only the Egyptian Book of the Dead, but the emerald tablets, the Hermetica, the Cor Cosmu, the Kublaion. He discovered the 7 underlying principles of all creation. The book, The Secret, was based on one of those principles, which is that the universe is elastic. It's responsive to thought and coupled with emotion. We can create our reality. That is only one of his 7 Hermetic principles that he discovered over tens of thousands of years as a master initiate. I have 2 DVDs on Thoth because he is such a profound teacher. There's no way to encompass him in only 2 hours. So I have 2 different ones. But we see here the emerald tablets, which were at the heart of Atlantis, which of course the green is connected with the heart chakra, is it not? Right? Green and pink. And we see the caduceus. The caduceus was always his symbol. We see here that there's 7 twining, 7 crossings going up with the 7 chakras. These represent the sympathetic and the parasympathetic nervous system that go up the spine, the male and the female, the Ida and the Pingala, which eventually unite here in this point. And when that happens, guess what? We get free. We can fly free. That's what the caduceus means. Of course, it became a symbol of healing within our modern world. Most people don't really know what it means today. It's an initiatic symbol. Now, Thoth is also very much linked to the cycles of time. He was a time lord. It was he and Ra and Ptah that discovered the precession of the equinox. They are the ones who set the zodiac in place. All of these things are great levels of legacy. In fact, 100 years after Jesus, the early Christian father, Clement of Alexandria, said that all of the wisdom of the world was contained within the 42 books that had been written by Thoth that at that time were still in the Library of Alexandria in Egypt. Books that Jesus well could have studied during his 7 years of initiatic training in Egypt. These contained knowledge about healing, medicine, herbology, architecture, mathematics, sacred geometry, magic, law, astronomy, astrology, you name it. He gave it to us. Thoth said that ye are gods going about in the bodies of mortals. And we are souls in the bodies of gods. These are beings who love humanity at a very, very high level. Thoth and his wife Shishat invented the 26-letter alphabet that we have today. Before that, it was ideograms. If you wanted to use 100,000 words, you had to learn 100,000 symbols. It was brilliant. Think about it. 26 letters, combine them in a million different ways, and you have a million different words with only 26 letters. This was a brilliant innovation so that during the descent into the dark age that we've been in, all knowledge would not be lost. It was Thoth that designed the Great Pyramid and placed upon the limestone casings all of the mathematics and astronomy that we would need for this coming during the time of darkness. The Muslims, of course, took all that down. In the 1600s, they took all of those glyphs down from the Great Pyramid. I talk about all of this in my book. And of course, you can go to Egypt and actually see sometimes a Muslim temple's part of the limestone casings with these codes and keys that Thoth left to us. So he was specifically connected, like Jesus, with the concept of the Logos. Here we have a very unusual image from Sumeria. This is Ptah Enki. He was the Lord of the Waters. Here we have, this is probably Tammuz, his son, and this is Thoth. Now, probably the very first shepherd prince was Tammuz. This is him. This is actually a copy of a much more ancient drawing. Sylvia Lorenz did this. You see the cross on the headdress. Tammuz was, because they were trying to help humanity, Tammuz was the one that was sent back to their planet for about 3,600 years to learn the arts of animal husbandry. They brought the sheep down. During the whole Cain and Abel story, the people in Mesopotamia, Enlil's group taught one of the brothers, and the people in Africa, South Africa, Tammuz taught the other brother. And then they both offered their offerings to the gods, and since the Enlil's group, they picked whoever it was. Cain killed Abel. I guess they picked Abel. Cain was jealous because he wanted the God's approval, and that's why he hit his brother in the head with a stone, and that's how we got that whole half-brother thing that continues to echo through time with the Jews and the Arabs and the Irish and the English, which is like this archetypal thing that we keep living out in the pattern. Very sad. But anyway, he was, you can see some of his symbols here. He was connected with the sun, connected with the lion. These are some of his symbols. Many times you'll see him connected with the tree of life, also with the grain cup. There's a whole long story. I talk about this in, I think, the Anunnaki DVD about Ishtar and Tammuz. This is the original Romeo and Juliet. She was from the house of Enlil. He was from the house of Enki. And, you know, it's a very long story about this. They were madly in love. They were engaged to be married. You know, it took them a long time to get permission from all the warring families, but eventually they were going to do it. And basically, to make a very long story short, he died. It was a big tragic accident. And so here we have things that were passed down for tens of thousands of years in the Mediterranean area. The shepherd, the wise one, the man of sorrows, why have they slain? In his temple, in his inhabited domain, the child, Lord of knowledge, abides no more. In the meadows, verily, verily, the soul of life perishes. He ruled for 36,000 years in Mesopotamia. Okay? The wailing is for the grain, ears are not produced. The wailing is for the habitation, for the flocks which bring no more. The wailing is for the perished, wedded ones. For the perishing children create no more. Now you see the Holy Grail. Where do we get the Holy Grail? This is the cup of plenty. And this is, again, connected with the vegetation cycles. And this was always linked, again, the symbol of the Holy Grail, to the great shepherd king. He later became identified with Adonis. In the Jewish teachings, Adonai, you know, have you heard that Sabaoth, Adonai, Kadosh, 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 Adonai, it's one of their sayings. Adonai, great Lord. This comes right from Adonis. He was also connected with the great tree of life. Adonis was said to have literally become one with the tree of life. And his return, like all great shepherd kings, was celebrated in the spring at the Easter time as the renewal of life and the return of the great solar Lord. And here we have, again, similarities with Osiris, the god of vegetation. And let me point out, this is Egyptian. Here is the door of knowledge. Here is the tree of life. And who dwells in the tree of life? Ah, it is the phoenix, the Benu bird. You know, Yeshua ben Joseph, Ben means son of, Benu bird, the son of the sun. Okay, the great phoenix. Here he is, the great Kumara who lives in the tree of life. If you will climb the tree of life, if you will activate, I have a whole DVD on the tree of life because it's intrinsic to the inner teachings of Jesus. If you will climb the tree of life, if you will activate your third eye, the great light, and connect with the Christ within, the doors of knowledge will open for you. This is what this means. The ever-renewing phoenix, the mystical bird that comes from the higher worlds and sings its song of beauty and glory, and then dies, but lays the seeds for its next coming before it dies, as Jesus did. Now, this is the Benu bird, and let's notice his symbols. First, he's got a sun on his head, but it's green, isn't it? Telling us he is a green Lord. He has a staff, the shepherd's staff, right here. And there are 9 flags for the Council of 9. And these are the 3 steps of initiation: physical, emotional, and mental. And he rides in the boat of heaven. This is the soul that's going into the halls of Amente. And the question is he's now connected with the Christ as the way shower. Has he opened his inner eye? Has he connected with the inner light? This is what we're talking about in this beautiful depiction. The Christians, of course, adopted this. Well, because why? Not because they were running around stealing things, but because those who knew understood what it meant. And, of course, Hermes, this is the Hermes bird. Here we are once again connected with the sun, telling us that these beings are all the same. They're all different, the 4 great Kumaras, but they're all different. They're quadruplets. You know, how I actually discovered the 4 great Kumaras was a month after, about 2 weeks into writing the book on Jesus, I realized that the evidence was showing that Jesus had studied in all these great mystery schools and that they were all part of the Great White Brotherhood. Now, I want to just say, for those of you who have wondered if the Great White Brotherhood is a spiritual KKK, it's not. I actually got asked that in one of my radio and television shows. And I'm like, goodness gracious. Because I know we're very sensitive to sexism and racism, it's important for me to say that they chose the color white because it was the color closest to purification and illumination, closest to the sun. And they chose brotherhood because This was at a time when there was a social caste system. You might be a royal person, or you might be military, or you might be an artisan or a craftsman or a peasant or a farmer, but the mystery schools were open to everyone. And when you stepped into the mystery schools, you laid down your outer ego, and all men and women stood as brothers and sisters of equality in a circle. This is why they chose that term. It was to say that we are all equal in the eyes of God. Social status does not matter. Now, this is the card for Osiris in the Tarot. Through reversal, good things come. Through the death of these great lords, the world is reborn. Now, personally, I hate for them to have to die, but clearly we see that there has been a pattern where this has happened. Osiris, the Lord of Resurrection, this is a Merkaba field. This is the activation of the six-pointed body. Each one of the seven subtle energy bodies has a sacred geometry to it. Here, once again, we see Osiris, and here's the tree of life. This is the tamarisk tree, also known as the Arcata tree. Guess what the crown of thorns was made of? The Arcata tree. The crown of thorns is the exact same tree that Osiris's body floated down the river in a coffin, and a tree enfolded it and grew around it, became a tall pillar like the tree of life. And it was cut down and taken to a temple as one of the pillars of the temple. And Osiris, being so telepathically, Isis, being so telepathically linked with her husband, eventually found him, had them cut down the column and retrieve his body. And he's flanked here by his wife, Isis, and his sister, Nephthys. Now, Nephthys wears a watchtower on her head. Mary Magdalene, Mary the watchtower, it's all connected, believe me. Mary the Magdalene was initiated as a priestess of Isis within the ancient traditions. And here we have the 3 steps of initiation that is worn as the crown of Isis. And here we have what's called the Tet, or the Dijet. This is always a representation of Osiris as the generating force of creation. But it's also the spine, isn't it? It looks kind of like the spine. In fact, I have images in one of my slideshows, in the Tree of Life slideshow, comparing this exactly to the vertebrae of the spine, and they fit. This is all connected with the Tree of Life. Now, all the ancient cultures of the world knew about the Tree of Life. The Tree of Life represents many things, but it is the XY axis of the time-space continuum. They come down from the higher worlds, where there is no time-space in the way we know it, and they allow themselves to come upon the cross of matter, as we have allowed ourselves to come into the cross of matter. Each of you are immortal, eternal souls. Each of you are light beings that have come from the higher heavens. Each of you are now in the lower worlds. You're in the third dimension. Of the 12 dimensional levels, 12, 11, 10, 9, and 8 are the higher angelic worlds. 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 are the time-space matrix. Every one of those planes has 12 suboctaves. The 10th suboctave, we're in the 10th suboctave of the third dimension. That's where we are. And we're moving up. We're moving up to the 4th, and some believe we'll even make it into the 5th dimension during this next 1,000 years of peace. And I think that may well be the case. But everything moves in a spiral. Time moves in a spiral as well as space. Some other great avatars have had connections with trees. Buddha became enlightened beneath a Bodhi tree, did he not? And this is the one world tree. This is, again, an illustration from Sylvia from my book. And there's many Hermetic things here. We have this is from the waters of creation, the waters of love and mercy. We have an island, which represented the great cosmic egg. Here's our chalice. Here's our tree of life. And above it, in the Celtic, they called it Aaronrod's silver wheel. The turn of the zodiac above us, the turn of the galaxy. And that they knew that this tree of life was connected with the center of creation. That if we could climb the tree of life, we could actually ascend into these higher realms. These are Norse and Celtic trees. Let me point out a few things here. Here is the Christed figure inside of a cosmic egg. Here's the tree of life. Here's Rigel, the great eagle above it, the father principle. Here are the two aspects of the divine mother and daughter that come into the world. You know, usually when the solar lords come, they come flanked by two women, the mother and the consort, Mary Magdalene and Mary the mother. For Buddha, for Krishna, for example, his mother Yashoda, his wife Radha. So he comes flanked with these two aspects of the divine feminine, represented by these doves. And in the ancient cosmology, it is he who cracks open the egg and begins the flowing of the waters of the world. And we see here the waters pouring down, and these are priests and priestesses waiting to receive the waters of life and pour it down into the mortal worlds of humans down here where death reigns. Now, this is very interesting because this symbology looks a great deal like the age of Aquarius, does it not? So we are on the verge, literally, of a tremendous transformation on this planet. And I could spend, 2 days talking about what's coming with that. I speak about some of it in the Age of Aquarius, that DVD. But again, perhaps next year, Dolores will have me back and I can speak about some of these other things. This is the Celtic version of the Tree of Life, creating an infinity symbol. Very interesting. And here is the Norse version of the Tree of Life, connected with the Chi-Rho, or the end of time. This is the Mayan world tree. This is the Siberian and Celtic world trees. So the tree, the cross, and the sun are all linked. This is actually from the Order of the Golden Dawn. This is, hermetically, this is how the ancients taught. The tree, they believe, actually had its roots in heaven, in the invisible world, okay, in the spiritual realms. What we see down here is just its limbs. Okay, we're in the ephemeral world, the world that will pass away. But there is the foundational worlds are actually in the spiritual realms. Most of us in Christianity, we only know this crazy story. As Daniel was talking last night about some of the crazy stories about the snake and the tree, and it's like, how many of you think any of that makes any sense? I mean, it's a little crazy. Adam and Eve, and there's a snake, there's two trees, and if you learn knowledge, it's a bad thing. You're punished forever. I never figured this out. Why can we not eat from the tree of knowledge? Isn't knowledge and wisdom a good thing? So there's something wrong with this story, and I actually know what the true story is, but it takes too long to tell you today. We'll see if we have time for questions in the end. But it's unfortunate that this is our version of reality in Judeo-Christianity. Because in truth, the tree of life within the ancient world was linked to a very deep roadmap to creation. And we see some remnants of this within the mysticism of Judaism and the great Kabbalah. They believe that these sephiroths, okay, all represented different aspects of ourselves, but they also represent the ring past knots, the gates that when we leave this world, we travel through the orbital planes of all the different planets. And we have to have the codes and keys to pass them. Down here is Malkuth. Malkuth is the physical world. But you can't even begin to climb the tree of life unless you go through Yeshad. Yeshad is the emotions. If we don't feel our emotions, we have no chance of climbing the tree. We have to feel our pain in order to get to our compassion and our forgiveness, don't we? In order to get to our love, we have to know what it is to suffer. So the feminine is critical. And this is one of the reasons when we start talking about gray aliens and them coming back for their emotional DNA, they can't climb the tree of life without it. Our emotions are very, very important. This is the Thoth's realm and Venus's realm. This is the mental, and this would be the beauty and sensuality. And we have to balance the mind and the heart together. And then we get to Christ's realm. This is the sun here. And he was always linked. His feet are here, and he comes up, and a lot of times you'll see his heart here, and then his head's up here. Now, there's a hidden sphere here called Da'ath. Da'ath is knowledge. And there's many stories about Da'ath. For the whole time I've been writing this book, Da'ath is represented by the planet of Pluto. How many of you are astrologers? Pluto is life, death, sex, taxes, deep shamanic initiations, and transformation. Okay? But it's Pluto, the Lord of the dead. It's a trans-dimensional planet. It's the outermost planet for our solar system. So if you want to get out of the solar system, you have to go through Pluto. So Pluto is where we drop our ego. We must die here. In order to finally get to these levels, you must lay down your ego. You must drop it. But it is the beginning of all knowledge when that ego is laid down. So this is a very beautiful, complex map for understanding the nature of creation and the worlds within worlds. And the serpent climbing the tree of life has nothing to do with the whole silly story that we were taught, which is a whole other thing. It has to do with the activation of the Kundalini circuitry within the body that allows us to finally clear our issues, to balance our inner selves, and to travel in these planes. It is linked to the heart of creation, and you see reflections of it far earlier. For example, in the Mithran symbology, here is the cosmic egg down here. He's coming out of the egg. Here it is at the top. He's got a little serpent here. And the snake is moving around, and he's holding the staff of knowledge and the torch of illumination. And he is in the middle of the cosmic egg, or the Vesica Piscis, like Jesus, surrounded by the 12 signs of the zodiac. He was known as he who stands beyond the worlds, he who is able to step between the ages, who lives beyond time and space, telling us this is another Kumara. This mythology or cosmology has been, just in the last 20, 30 years, other, let us say, philosopher, academics have been taking a look at this. He was born between the age of Taurus, the bull, and here's Gemini, the twins. Now, how can we tell that? There's lots of things. Look opposite Taurus, here's Mr. Scorpio. Here's the scorpion down here. And we see the serpent again, enlightenment. The 7 lanterns of knowledge that must be lit, the 7 chakras. When you begin to penetrate Hermetics, your whole mind will open up. I actually just did a brand new DVD on Hermetics, on the 9 orders of the angels, and on Jesus and the Great White Brotherhood. Those are brand new ones that just I did last month. So here's Mithra, who holds the world on his shoulders like Jesus or Atlas. Think about it. He's got the whole world in his hands. He's got the whole world in his hands. We're talking about these same divine beings. Connected with the cosmic egg, here's Mithra. And this is really worn, but you can see the 4-legged. Here's a dog. There's a snake someplace near. It's hard for me to see here. But anyway, the 4 kingdoms are all created here. To the Greeks, they call this presence phanes, which means light. And this whole Orphic egg, the great serpent kings. Now, why were they serpent kings? Because they come to raise the Kundalini of the planet. And the way I discovered them, I started to tell you this story earlier. I was, why don't you guys stand up? Stand up while I tell you this story. Breathe in. I know this is a lot of information, squished into 2 hours. But, you know, it's cool information, don't you think? It kind of shifts everything. So you see how it connects, you know, which is, I'm sure, why Jesus wanted me to write this darn book. So what happened was you can sit whenever you want, stand as long as you want, move as long as you want, just want you present. So about 2 weeks into writing the book on Jesus, I realized I was dealing with the presence of this profound, illuminated group of master sages who had the keys to this knowledge. And perhaps if I had not been trained in these mysteries for some 30 years, I would never have figured all this out. But I'm sure that, you know, how we all have this strange life path that brings us to where we are, and perhaps, you know, being a mystic and a clairvoyant and having, you know, this fundamentalist side of my family had made me always integrate when I was studying all the rest of the mysteries with Jesus. So I realized I was dealing with the Great White Brotherhood, and I began to pray for information about the Great White Brotherhood to be sent to me, but it couldn't be channeled because while channeled information may be very cool, I cannot use it historically. I have to have historical, grounded data if anyone's going to take you seriously about this subject. So I began to pray for information about the White Brotherhood. And one morning, it was a Monday or Sunday, like 5 o'clock in the morning, this divine master who looked so much like Jesus, but he was a hair's breadth different, appeared in my bedroom. And the only thing he said to me was, Sanat Kumara. And then he vanished. Now, all that week, I was being taken into initiation ceremonies with people dressed in white, and they made the sign of the serpent on my forehead, and I was like, I was raised Episcopalian, I do have that fundamentalist thing, and it's like, the serpent on my forehead, oh my gosh, what does this mean? So I happened to have this housemate, this Indian. It was Shankar is his name, and he had studied with the Viragi masters as I had. He grew up in India, he knew the Viragi physically, personally, and Shankar called one day, and I said, Shankar, what do you know about Sanat Kumara? And he said, oh, he is one of the 4 great Kumaras. I was like, well, who are the 4 great Kumaras? Oh, there is Sanat Kumara, who is, of course, the head of the Great White Brotherhood. And I was like, really? Well, who else? Well, there is Sananda Kumara, who was, of course, Jesus. I was like, what? well, who else? Well, there is Sananka Kumara. I was like, well, what's his deal? Well, he comes to set up all the great schools. I was like, Thoth. And I said, who's the last one? Oh, there is Sanandana Kumara. He comes very rarely, only in times of greatest darkness, when it looks as if the dark will come and take over the world. I was like, well, oh my gosh, it's Horus. Because after the death of Osiris, Egypt was thrown into chaos. Osiris and Isis came together right before the flood. After the flood, we were starving to death down here. Cannibalism reigned. There was no food. Where were the animals? Okay? It was a really rough time on the planet. So Osiris left Isis in charge of Egypt, and he traveled the world. And he was a musician. He brought everyone together with joy and happiness, and he fed them first, and then he taught them agriculture. He taught them to plant their own plants so that they might live and prosper. And he was loved the world over, and he did this for 450 years. And when he went back to Egypt, Set was, of course, always waiting to figure out when he could take him out. Eventually, after he was destroyed, there was no lineage. And the story is that Isis brought him back, resurrected him, impregnated herself with his child, probably artificial insemination. But he's the first Lord of resurrection through the power of love. And then she gave birth to Horus way down in Philae in southern Egypt. And she raised him in secret. And for 350 years, darkness overcame all of Egypt, the Lord of chaos, Set. So Horus eventually grew strong enough, and he was a musician. They said he was trained by Osiris, who came in spirit form, and he eventually learned the arts of war. Well, clearly, if he was Apollo, he was really the god of healing and joy and all this other stuff, but he had to pony up, okay, and be the manly man. And it was an 80-year war, and he fought Set, eventually defeated him. And those who came to join him were the Shimshu Hor. The Shimshu Hor were the followers of the way of Horus, the way of truth. And he bequeathed Egypt to them, and they became the first priesthood for Egypt that set up the great mystery schools with Thoth and Isis and Horus overseeing them, so that humans might not fall into forgetfulness, that we might remember our own divinity, we might remember our own eternal nature, and that we might claim that godlike nature that dwells within us all. Anyway, he's come in several times. He's also come as Krishna and Rama, very similar MOs. They come very seldom to the planet, that particular divinity. So here's Mithra. We're going to kind of go through these very quickly because I am aware of time. Again, you see Jesus coming out of the cosmic egg along with Mithra here, carrying very similar, here's the staff, the light. We see Mary coming out of the same cosmic egg. And here, by the way, I want to point out that this is the shape of Avalon, the Isle of Avalon, and the Tor. And here, of course, is the Ithcus that Jesus taught. And here is the Eye of Horus. This all has to do with the cosmic egg and the balance between the divine Father and Mother. This is from the temples of Heliopolis, the Temple of the Sun. Even in the great cathedrals, the bottom of the cathedrals, the sanctuaries are formed like cosmic eggs. And there, of course, caves have been a very powerful sacred sanctuary for mystics and saints the world over for thousands of years. We see the Eleusinian mysteries in the caves, the cave of the prophet with Mount Carmel, where Elijah went. Mithra was born in a cave, Jesus in a cave, Lord Shiva taught in a cave, and of course, we got Revelation from the cave. Let me just take a look at our time. I want to be a little honoring of that. We're pretty close. We're about 4:20, something like that. So I want to check in with Dolores to see I have about 10 minutes left. And so I can, do I have just a little time? Okay. So we're going to fly through some of this. How are you guys doing out there? Is this fun? Are you learning a lot? It's fun, isn't it? Well, I have, that's why I've created all these DVDs, so afterwards you can come see me. The sun is the source of life, and, I love this. This is a wonderful cosmologist, modern-day cosmologist called Brian Swyme, and he says the sun's extravagant bestowal of energy can be regarded as a spectacular manifestation of an underlying impulse pervading the very universe. In the star, this impulse reveals itself in the ongoing giveaway of energy. In the human heart, it is felt as the urge to devote one's life to the well-being of a larger community. He's saying that literally, until the modern era, we simply did not know that the actual energy coursing through our respiratory and nervous systems was bestowed upon us by the sun itself, and that our own vitality is a natural evolutionary development of the sun's vitality. This is what they've actually learned physically. So it shifts everything. This is a seal of the Vatican, telling us again they knew these secrets. Here's the sun. They call this St. Peter's Square, but it's clearly not a square, is it? It's a sun. And the obelisk in the middle represents the tree of life. And if you could see this at even a higher level, it looks like a key of knowledge. The dome of St. Peter with the divine male and female right here, and the stars. These were symbols of the great mystery schools. Here we see the moon, the sun, and the blazing star. Jesus says, I am the bright and morning star. I am the blazing star. When I return, I will come from the east. This was always associated also with Horus. Here we have, again, Michelangelo's Capitol Plaza. Here we have the 12 points of the sign of the zodiac, 12 with the 1 in the center, the 13th, and the matrix of time, space. There's a lot to be said. I'm just going to kind of go forward here. I am the way, the truth, and the light. I have come as a light into the world, that whosoever believes in me should not abide in darkness. The shepherd's crook and the caduceus, this predates Jesus by a long time. There's certain symbols connected. The descent of the dove. And really, many years ago, about 17 years ago, the dove descended into my field. The Dovine mantle is what it's called. And it really changed my life in many ways. We know there have been many other great mystics and teachers throughout time that have had these symbols connected with them. Isis's name, one of her secret names was Ahu, which means high dove. So this was one of her great initiatic symbols as well. These are the shepherd king staffs, and there's much to say about these as well, but we've talked about this one. But here we have the shepherd king from the Vatican. Here we have it with Zoroaster, the caduceus, and it's connected, of course, with the activation of our DNA, is it not? Sorry. This is Celtic, and this has to do with the mastery of air, earth, fire, and water, all of these elements that we must master in our journey towards perfection. Asclepius, the father of medicine, carried one. This was an initiatic staff that one got at either the second level or the third level of the Egyptian mysteries, telling us he was trained within that tradition, as was Moses. Only the highest level initiate had the double serpent snake. This is the brazen serpent from the Bible. So Moses was an initiate of Heliopolis, but he had not attained the very highest level. But he had obviously attained a very high level. Most people have no idea what the serpent around this means, but it is really the serpent lords upon the cross of time and space and the activation of this DNA, activated by light along the sympathetic nervous system. And here we have actually a picture of a spine and a picture of the D-jet. Actually, I think this is the spine and that's the D-jet. The generating power of the world. The circuitry of both the microcosm and the macrocosm that is connected literally with the axis of the world and the awakening cycles of mankind. This is also connected with the Chi-Rho. The Chi-Rho, this is a Vatican symbol taken right from Osiris. Here's the X, and here are the 3 flails we saw earlier, and here's the shepherd's staff that's closed in. It's the cosmic crater. It's the one who inserts himself into the world, who determines consciousness or helps to try to raise the consciousness. And we can see these symbols are connected with something that was called the Tau cross. The Tau cross is connected not only with the Divine Mother. This is, of course, this is the symbol that Constantine saw that he put on his shields that they say allowed him to decide to allow Christianity to flourish. It actually goes back to the Divine Mother and the Divine Feminine. But he had this symbol put on the shields of his men when he was outnumbered 5-1. And it was because of that success that he finally said yes. The Christians claim that this was connected to Jesus. But actually it was connected much further back. You can see here's Tammuz from Babylon, the cross. These are depictions of that same Chi-Rho expressed in different forms. But it's connected with the completion of the cycles of time, the end of the 26,000-year cycle of the ages. So these great lords come between the ages periodically, and they come at the end of time, which is why you can see here Osiris, here's the flail, which is why I believe that we may be having a return of one or more of these great lords. And that, of course, is a very deep conversation. So I kind of want to skip now to just talk for a moment about the tree of life and the way. Jesus called his path the way. Buddha called his the middle way. Thoth called his the ancient way. And I think, considering our time, that this is a good place to, in terms of slides, to stop. Because it's understanding what this path is. And if you remember in the Tree of Life, there were 3 lines. There's this side, and there's the middle path, okay? They're talking about, you can spend a lot of time over here in the mental, you can spend a lot of time over here in the emotional, you can get caught in the eddies of any of these. But the path at the end of the day is the middle path. It's the path of the heart. It's the path of forgiveness. It's the path of compassion. And it's really what Jesus was about, and it's what all of these 4 great Kumaras have come to really teach us. Because it is only through this activation of being in the physical world, Malkuth, feeling our feelings and our emotional self, allowing ourselves to move into the heart and the activation of the heart, bringing this up to where we drop the ego, da'ath, and we are reborn in spirit. We activate our third eye. We have the divine male and female balanced within us, that we in fact do find the kingdom of heaven. So with that, I'd like to end the official part of this presentation. And if Dolores gives me 5 minutes or so, I'm happy to take questions. But I thank you all so very much for listening. I know it was a lot to hear all at once.
Questions that are going to have to come. We're out of time. You're going to have to come to your booth to ask questions.
No problem.
But Tricia, one thing I wanted to make clear, this is what people don't understand, is that Jesus learned all of this during the missing years. The church doesn't want you to know that. They want you to have the idea he just suddenly came out of the hills one day with all this knowledge and nobody taught him. That's not true.
I want to also say that I think Dolores' work has been incredibly important on many, many levels. And you know, in this whole historic, amazing, all these documents I was brought that I quote, she's the only one that I decided I would take the chance of saying, Dolores Cannon, this amazing, you know, hypnotherapist of some 35 years, has gone back and discovered the accounts of Sudi, the teacher of the law. That was in Jesus and the Essenes. If you haven't gotten that book, you should. She's got it on sale at her booth. Also, They Walk with Jesus. And then Children of the Light, which is two wonderful British hypnotherapists from England who had all this information from 5 or 6 hypnotherapy subjects that they had. And just recently, I've just gotten her Power of the Magdalene, because I think Dolores has, where I've been able to go places no one can go, Dolores has been able to do the same, and I think we all owe her a great debt of gratitude. So.
But I think it's important for people to put it into perspective that the church has hidden this and distorted it all these years. Now,
you know, I've been doing this work for 45 years. And over that time, I invented my own technique. I began to find out new things that came in that nobody else had ever discovered. So big and so important, so we called it QHHT, because it's way beyond past life regression. And this is the healing technique that we've now been teaching it, well, since 2002, that's 12 years. Well, as part of this technique, the very first thing that you do is take the client into a past life. Past life is just the very, very beginning. Then we go to this great power that I work with. To please take advantage of the training that is now available online. You can find it through my website, DoloresCannon.com.